Dave, I got caught by the law, right? And as the song says, the law won, so my business was shut down.
Today's guest is Luis Derechin, a lifelong entrepreneur who's built, lost, and rebuilt companies across borders and industries. Starting with selling Mexican candy at age 11, Luis's journey took him from importing housewares with his family to pioneering direct sales in Mexico and even founding Jack B, Mexico's first tech startup to secure major U.S. venture capital funding. Currently the CEO and founder of NIR-YU, a nearshoring firm, Luis is redefining how companies build remote teams in Latin America. In this episode, we dig deep with Luis into his wild ride of entrepreneurship, from the gut punches of economic collapse to catching lightning in a bottle with new ventures. You'll hear hard-won lessons on resilience, innovation, building successful remote teams, and discovering the offshore team death trap that derails so many global projects. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a startup leader, or just love stories of perseverance, this episode is packed with wisdom and energy that you won't want to miss. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. All right, Luis Derechin, welcome to Beyond Fulfillment.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure, and I thank you for giving me a space to talk to your audience.
Yes, sir. So our audience is entrepreneurs, and you are certainly a lifelong entrepreneur. Looking at your story here, it's fascinating. So you're currently the CEO and founder of NIR-YU, which is a nearshoring firm that's doing very well and does things differently. So we'll certainly get into that. But you've been a lifelong entrepreneur starting from childhood where you grew up in Mexico. So if you could just kind of give us your backstory and how you got here, that'd be very valuable for our audience.
Sure. Yeah, I certainly have the scars to prove that I'm an entrepreneur, right? Both psychological and, dare I say, even some physical ones. So I think the story you're referring to, Dave, was my first entrepreneurial attempt at greatness. I was born in Mexico, but I actually grew up in San Diego, California, and it was there in San Diego that my parents, being true to our Mexican origins or our Mexican culture, would with us cross the border once in a while. San Diego's right on the border, Tijuana and San Diego, and we lived about 3 miles from the border. So this is, imagine, if you will, in the mid to late 70s, and we'd cross over, go have tacos, go whatever, and then go back. It was much easier to navigate the border back then. And I got it into my mind that given that I like Mexican candy, I would take some Mexican candy and sell it at my school, right? So I took a couple bucks. I bought some Mexican candy on our next travel to Tijuana, took it back to San Diego, and I sold it out, incredibly fast. That's called product market fit, right? So all of a sudden, I was 11 and I had found product market fit. So I figured, let's go gangbusters. I asked my father to loan me $20. I bought $20 worth of candy, which back then was a lot of candy. I stuffed it into my bag, went to school, and proceeded to sell it. The only problem is, even though I had found product market fit, I forgot about the regulatory aspect of being an entrepreneur in elementary school. And I got caught by the principal because the kids had spent all of their money on candy, and the cafeteria didn't sell any lunch for a couple days because everyone was spending their money on me. And rather than giving kids a proper nutrition, they were all eating spicy and sour Mexican candy. So
if your business is an e-commerce brand, this message is for you. Logistics can make or break you. If you're tired of being just a number to those big box 3PLs, you need to check out our team at Easy DC 3PL. We're a different kind of partner, built specifically for growing brands that ship between 1,000 and 10,000 orders per month. We offer warehousing, fulfillment, and transportation with a focus on personalized service and flexibility. Our central Kentucky location gives you nationwide reach, turning logistics into a competitive advantage. So if you're ready to partner with a 3PL that actually gets your brand, visit easydc3pl.com.
Dave, I got caught by the law, right? And as the song says, the law won, so my business was shut down.
Wow. So you were a disruptor from a very early age, disrupting the school lunch profits, so much so that they shut your company down. So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. So you clearly had that entrepreneurial bug from a very early age, and just being able to experiment and have that intuition and take action like you did. And obviously it got shut down and whatnot. But so how did that develop over the years and kind of into your teen and your adult life and the other businesses that you started?
Yeah. So bitten by the bug is correct. And given that your audience are all entrepreneurs, they're probably all, nodding their head. All of them or most of them would have a story similar to my candy story, right? Whether it's the lemonade stand or plowing snow, for those that lived in a climate where snow fell and whatnot. But as I grew up, um, I was always looking for what to do, and I remember moving back from uh, the U.S. to Mexico when I was about 19. I moved back chasing a girl who's now my wife of 33 years, so successful chase. Um, but after college in the U.S., I went back to school in Mexico, and I was doing my studies in Mexico, and then basically. What happened is in the mid 80s, late 80s, Mexico went from a closed economy where it didn't let any imports in to an open economy. All of a sudden, people were importing all sorts of things to sell in Mexico. So, having been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, I figured here's the opportunity. And my father and I, we spoke about it and we went into business together. So what we would do is we would buy housewares being everything from well, not electronics, but appliances, blenders, juicers, those types of things to dinnerware sets, to silverware, tumblers, everything that you could buy for a house, we would buy it in Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Turkey, Greece, Indonesia, bring it into Mexico and sell it. So there I was at 20 years old, and I was tasked, given that my father was an incredible salesperson. I didn't want to take the focus away from sales because, as every entrepreneur will tell you, sales is number one task. So I was given the responsibility at 20 to travel the world and go find products that we could buy elsewhere at a good enough price, right? Negotiate proper terms, bring them into Mexico and sell them. And that went well for 4 or 5 years. We grew it, and it was where my entire family lived off and made some decent money until there was a huge economic debacle 1994. There was a devaluation. Most Americans, when you say devaluation, want to understand what that is. But basically, imagine, if you will, the foreign currency being X, and then the following day it was worth about 40% of what it previously was. And it was a debacle for us because we had receivables in pesos and we had payables in dollars. So now it turns out that the money that we were owed is only worth 40 cents to the dollar. And what we owe is in dollars. So that company sort of went the way the dodo, right? It went extinct. And it was there that I thought about a new business selling housewares, but we did it in a very different manner through direct sales promoters that would carry a catalog and sell it in order to make larger margins. And we grew that to about 35,000 independent distributors that had our catalog and would sell all sorts of housewares in Mexico. And did that for a while until I founded a technology company. I was bitten by the dot-com bug as well, and I founded a technology company that became Mexico's first tech startup to raise U.S. venture capital funding.
Okay, yeah, and that's called Jack B. We'll get into that here in a second, but I just want to go back to the housewares company. So,
Yeah.
you had this idea. Mexico's a closed economy. All of a sudden, it opens up. You spot the opportunity. You partner up with your dad, who's a great salesperson, and I'm sure kind of mentored you too. And you start this great business in terms of importing all these different products. You're traveling the world. You're making good money. The family's eating, life is good, right? You're having fun. And then, like you said, this currency devaluation happened, and overnight, right, you're upside down, really through no fault of your own. That's just sometimes the life happens, and that's what happened. Like, what was it like in that moment when you have this thriving company that you're growing and you've grown over several years to get hit, like, you really get punched in the gut with something like that? What was that like?
Dave, punched in the gut is the absolute understatement. I mean, in your question, you made three or four statements that I want to emphasize. First of all, it's here we are, thriving business. I just gotten married, right? So I was fortunate enough that I had bought a plot of land, and we were beginning to buy a house, right? I was 24, 25, living the dream. My recently married bride is, has all the faith in the world that things are going to be okay. Uh, my family, we had our home in Mexico City, vacation home in Acapulco, whatnot, and all of a sudden, through no fault of our own, right, we get punched in the gut, and then you said underwater. Well, upside down. David was being upside down and underwater. And all of a sudden, you're sitting there flailing. You have no idea what to do. Um, but ultimately, you got to keep living and you got to keep figuring things out. And as entrepreneurs, what other options are there? Right? You have to look at yourself in the mirror, face reality, and say, yeah, it sucks. So we had to sell the vacation home in Acapulco to make good on our debts. I had to sell the plot of land where I was building my home. I had to come home and tell my wife, well, you remember that you married someone successful? Well, now you married a pauper, right? I have nothing to my name. I lost everything I had overnight because we had faith in the systems and in the country and in the foreign exchange rate. But as I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know, you have no other option but to continue. There's only one way, and it's forward, right? Backwards, never.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great attitude through something like that. And so you pivoted, same industry, housewares, where you'd been so successful, but then like, what made you do that? Was it just because you had the experience in that industry and then you figured, okay, if we just switch up the model and we're not so dependent on foreign exchange, that we can really just leverage our experience and create something successful again right away?
So the answer is yes, but it's a little more complex. And the complexity comes in that um, one of our largest customers in Mexico was a gentleman that created. Most of your listeners won't understand this, but it's and it exists in the U.S. These are called saving circles, and these are things that existed back in the late 19th century in order for people to save when there was no consumer credit. This is before credit cards, before consumer credit, and when money was more difficult to get. So what it consists of is you would bring together a group of 10 people, and those 10 people would agree that they would pony up, let's say, $10. So everyone would pony up $10 twice a month, right? Every fortnight. And then they would gather the $100, and then one person would get the $100 one fortnight, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So it was a community event in order to motivate people to sort of contribute to the saving circles, understanding that each person was going to get their distribution, their allotment. So this gentleman that we were selling to in Mexico realized that he could do the same thing, but selling products instead of doing the savings. What he would do is, well, I'm going to sell 10 TVs, and he would find ten people who wanted to buy the TVs. So those 10 individuals would all put up 10% of what the TV was owed, right? He would take the money and then he'd give a TV to one person and then another person and then another person. And these were the numbers or the orders were given through luck, right? They were allotted through a drawing. This seems simple enough, and it is, mind you, in a lot of countries, you were able to buy housewares, automobiles, different types of things in these saving circles. So to your question, I had seen what this gentleman was able to do, providing credit without really providing credit. It's what's called auto financing. We were broke. We didn't have two pennies to rub together, Dave. I kid you not. So, I sort of faced reality and said, well, what am I going to do? All I know how to sell is housewares, but I have no money to invest in anything, so I can't sell anything that I can't invest. I know. If I can convince 10 people to buy the same product and take their money, then I basically take their money, buy the product, make a margin, and then distribute the product. And if I could do that often enough, and make it repeatable, then it could be a good business. So it was sort of out of desperation, out of something I knew, and out of just the sheer reality that we were broke, and this was a way to make some money when there was no other way that we could go on.
Okay. And how quick did that company take off?
So first 6 months it was slow, we all had to tighten our belts, and then we sort of hit the hockey stick, and it grew in 5 years from zero to about US 15 million per year, 35,000 distributors, and and going gangbusters. I mean, the warehouse where we had our products was 10,000 square meters, which is about 100,000 square feet. So, we went from zero to a pretty frothy business that had been self-financed, just on the value of finding enough of these groups to jointly buy the products over 5 years. So it was interesting.
Okay. Wow. And like to go through such a tough time, right? To kind of be like living a high life and then be broke overnight and really have to claw back and use your ingenuity, and then you build something like this again, build an even bigger business, right? What was that feeling like?
Look, I was young and stupid, and I thought that I was it, right? I mean, if I could do this, I could do it over and over and over. And again, most of your listeners will know that sometimes you catch lightning, in a bottle, and sometimes you don't. So I was a bit. I try to be humbled, but I think within that humility, I was still a bit cocky. Uh, but it was exciting. There is nothing as exciting as being proven right by the market. Whenever you find that product market fit, it's like, and I'm not a golfer, but I've played golf a few times. And when you strike the ball just perfect and watch it sail, in a straight line and far away, that golfers claim that that's the feeling that they're after every stroke. Being an entrepreneur, it's like that, right? You have an idea. Once you prove it, once the market accepts it, you're addicted to that feeling. So, it was like that. And fortunately, we had hit the feeling so much so that over time, I figured that I would quit that company and left it to my family to run. And me and one of my brothers, we founded a technology company. Mind you, I was not a techie. I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured my brother was a techie, and I'd been relatively successful, that we could do this.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about that. So that company was Jack B, and a tech company, and you weren't a techie, but your brother was, and clearly you'd had some entrepreneurial success and a lot of experience given even though you're relatively young at that time. So talk about that company and how you went about growing that.
Sure. So the company was in when we started it, this is probably around the year 2000. And we were one of the first anywhere to adopt Web 2.0 technologies. And a lot of your listeners won't understand what that means, and I won't get into a whole lot of detail, but it was a different way to generate web pages. We now live in an age with broadband and a lot of interaction with web pages. 25 years ago, web pages were static in nature with not a whole lot of interaction, that were informative. So we were one of the first companies that allowed web pages to be far more interactive than they currently are. And we leveraged the fact that we were in a country where the web hadn't yet sort of exploded. It was beginning to do so, and we created some technology for use locally that we were fortunate to sell to some large enterprises in Latin America. And with that, without really looking for funding, funding sort of found us, and we decided to um, take the technology to the US market. And let me tell you, if being punched in the gut is something we mentioned previously. I wasn't prepared to do business in the US because it is incredibly different. The way you market, the way you sell, the way you promote, everything about business. All of us think that if you can do business in one geography, it's the same in another. Nothing could be less true. And when I moved to the US, I had no idea what I was doing, despite the fact that we had been, you know, relatively successful in Latin America. And I spent the first year, just trying to figure out what to do. Fortunately, through some hires, hired some really good people, some people that helped me, investors that were able to coach me and mentor me. We sort of found our way, and that company was around for about 13, 14 years, raising uh, a lot of money until its eventual acquisition. So, we found our way.
Okay. All right. So you started this in Mexico and you said you weren't looking for funding. Funding found you, and you actually became the first Mexico's first tech startup to get major US VC funding, especially given someone not only with no experience selling in the US, let alone no experience negotiating venture capital funding. Like what was that? And not even, you said you weren't looking for it, that it found you. What was that process like?
Uh, I mean, it's like anything. You sort of learn. I've heard fake it till you make it, so you sort of do fake it. Trying to get advice here and there, trying to figure out exactly what to do. Um, but it was an interesting process in that fortunately I was a US citizen, right? And I'd been raised in the US, so it's not like the US was totally foreign to me. So I had the culture, didn't know how to conduct business, but still, at least, I spoke it well. I understood the culture. I understood many of the nuances. I'd done business elsewhere. So I think given the fact that probably the valuation, given that we were a Latin American company, was lower and the risk was, I guess, lower because they were investing less into my company than they would to a similar company in the US. VCs were willing to take a bigger risk on us, but they did it, and it sort of worked out.
Okay.
But it was
All
super
right.
interesting.
Super what?
Interesting. It was exhilarating, right? I mean, yeah. One day I'm working out of my proverbial garage in Mexico, and the next day I'm in Washington D.C. Trying to figure out how to penetrate the U.S. market. It's you know challenging, but interesting.
Okay. All right. And then that led you to there looks like there was another company in between, but now you're the CEO and the founder of Near-You. And
Correct.
that's got an interesting story about how that started almost by accident. Could you just talk about how that happened?
Sure, and it has a lot to do with Jack B. So one of the things that happened at the tech company is when I moved to the US and then realized that the technology that we were selling in Latin America wasn't as germane or didn't have as good a fit in the US market, we had to figure out, how were we going to pivot? And the first thing you do is you look at your cash balance and then you look at your expenses and realize that the runway, we didn't have a very long runway. So we had to build out a team that could market the technology, sell the technology, and understand the nuances of the American market and how to make the company pivot. But at the same time, we had to keep building technology. So long story short is we built a hybrid team with a fair number of individuals in Mexico and some others in the US. Mind you, this is in the early 2000s, so no Skype. No, Skype existed, but no Zoom, no Slack, no real-time communication. So, it was a mess, but we figured out how to give it a go. And as we grew offices in Mexico. We had some people in Colombia, we had some people in India. We had offices in the DC area, in Silicon Valley, in Fremont, California. So through distributed offices, kind of came to realize that remote work was incredibly important. So, skip forward 14 years, the company is acquired, and I start getting calls. I was given the proverbial thanks of the new acquirer, because most founders and CEOs don't survive an acquisition. So that was my case. I didn't survive. I was sent home with a check and a boot in up my butt. And while I was there, I got some phone calls from some other CEOs in the region that were trying to do offshore or nearshore projects, and their projects weren't going well, and they asked if I could consult for them. So I started doing that, to take up some of my time and to have something to do. And I came to realize that parts of the offshore or nearshore model were broken. Um, Identified what we call the offshore team death trap, which is 73% of all offshore projects or nearshore projects fail, Dave. Okay? I mean, it's a huge statistic. People will hire in order to save money, and if they don't know how to do it correctly, then they'll probably save money, but the project won't be successful. So the savings didn't materialize, right? They save on wages, but unsuccessful project. So came to identify the offshore team death trap and the components that make up the offshore team death trap, and founded a company to try to inject the fix to those offshore teams, and that company is now called NIR-YU.
Okay. And so let's talk about that too, right? Because nearshoring and offshoring is so huge these days in so many industries. So what like and that's a stat I hadn't heard that, and it's not one that I think is really put out there, at least uh like that, in terms of 73% of all these projects fail. So talk more about that. What is the offshore team death trap, and how does NIR-YU do things differently?
Sure. So uh, there have been studies, I believe Boston Consulting Group and a few universities that have these similar statistics to what I'm going to say. These are, although we've lived this and these are our numbers, it's backed up by several studies. Although it's not really put out there in the ether, so to speak, because uh, more and more companies want to leverage talent outside the US. And the reason is pretty simple. The war for talent in the US is brutal, right? With unemployment at where it is, any company that wants to be successful looks to be able to hire the right talent. And if they can do it at the right cost, even better. So a lot of these companies are looking elsewhere, right? Whether it's India, Philippines, Ukraine, or nearshore, which is Latin America, in order to hire. And many of these engagements are small engagements, onesies, twosies, where you hire a virtual assistant, or you hire, a programmer here, a programmer there, a marketer, a customer support representative, or a business development representative. And statistics aren't really kept for a lot of those projects. But again, three-quarters of most of those fail. And they fail because they go into it thinking that it's going to be as easy to execute as if you had someone working shoulder to shoulder with you, right? Um, the culture is the people are going to be able to pick up the culture as easily as if they were there with you. The tasking, the management, working with people remotely requires a lot of intentional effort to create the right systems, uh, the right feedback loops. When you hire, you have to hire not only for skills, but for culture, for the right attitude, the right personality. So it requires a lot more going into it than just hiring someone else to work in an office. And because of that, most engagements, people will go into it sort of eyes wide shut, not realizing that they have to do things differently. And that's where my company stands out because we understand how it has to be done from the get-go. And we work with many startups and mid-market companies in order to help them be successful from the get-go. And then as their projects evolve, right, in the natural evolution of their projects and their hiring.
Okay. All right. So you see this gap in the market and you see, people are asking you to consult and you see how that the model you say is broken. So you start this company and that was in 2020. And I mean, that's right in the middle of COVID. I mean, I suppose that probably helped you given that remote work really took off at that point.
So the answer is yes, it helped. It also hindered because uh, you're not able, I wasn't able to travel, to US, meet clients, meet all those things. So it helped because remote work became more of a natural thing, right? Whereas before, I don't know the exact statistics, but people were certainly more reticent to hire people to work remotely during the pandemic. There was no other option. And frankly, if you were going to hire on the other side of the city, then it'd be almost the same to hire on the other side of the state, the other side of the country, or even cross the border and do it in another country. So yes, it helped in one sense and it hindered another. But started in 20, and as you said, during the pandemic 2020, and then have sort of grown from there. Now we have about 400 people that one way or another, right? We help manage in different projects, and we're incredibly proud of the work that we do with startups and mid-market companies to help them lower their costs by 60 to 70% while maintaining their effectiveness and efficiency.
Okay. And so given this is your, I guess I've lost count with like what number business this is of yours, but how did, I mean, because it sounds like you scaled that, nicely in just a few years. How did all your previous experience and the ups and downs and all that stuff you've been through kind of help you with growing Near-You?
So like anything, I think that entrepreneurship, a lot of it has to do with identifying patterns and then, trying to figure out how you put those patterns together. So the first thing, if I could, is we identified the seven components of the offshore team death trap, right? And these are patterns that we saw playing over and over as executives and founders tried to hire remotely from Latin America or elsewhere. We saw things like talent mirage, right? Where people were hiring for skills that looked solid on paper, but sort of crumbled under real project pressure. Or the cultural chasm. Um, you hired initially without realizing that you had to hire for uh, cultural adeptness, right? Not only skills. So the fact that sometimes the people, as skilled as they were, they just didn't mesh. The cultural didn't mesh. Uh, the hidden cost spiral. You hire a third party to help you do, whatever it is you want to do, and you have faith and trust in that company, and then realize that, their only goal is to make well, I wouldn't say their only goal, but their goal is to make money for themselves, and in doing so, don't partner as nicely as you thought they were going to partner. So we call it the hidden cost spiral. management quicksand, not knowing how you manage remote teams, communication fog. If you don't have the right level of communication cadence and the ability to communicate both asynchronous and synchronous, then you're going to create communication fog, which may lead to the retention revolving door and quality erosion. So the first thing was identifying these components, and then we created a business model through what we call the remote intelligence framework that so sort of works to counteract all those components of the death trap in order to uh, attempt to create successful projects. So, it was easier because we were able, in my consulting gigs, we were able to identify all of the things you shouldn't do. And then we created a business model in order to create what you should do and make sure that the model followed that.
Okay. Once again, a true entrepreneur, right? You after your acquisition, you kind of get thrust into consulting where people are just asking for your help, and then you identify a whole new business model, and you're seeing what's wrong and everything not to do, and then you reverse engineer a company that does things the right way. So, yeah, hats off to you.
Thank you.
Um, so with Near-You, I mean, if people want to get in touch, find out more about what Near-You is doing, or they need some help with remote assistance, what's the remote work? What's the best way people can reach out to you for that?
So LinkedIn is the best way. It's the only social media I'm currently on. So NIR-YU, NIR-YU, and you can go on LinkedIn. On our website, that my contact information or email, whatnot, are both in LinkedIn is there. We have a toll-free number that people can call. So happy to help. And if uh, I published a book recently, a few months ago, called The Offshore Team Death Trap, obviously, in which I explain what the seven components of the death trap are, and then I explain also the remote intelligence framework, and I want to put it out there to the world. This isn't a trademarked framework or anything. We're putting it, open sourcing it so that other people can see what they have to do in order to be successful. If they need help or want help, happy to provide our services. But if they just pick up the book, and I believe we're selling it at $9 or something for the digital version. So it's not like, I don't make any money from the book. Seriously, we just put it out there in order for people to read it, gain the knowledge. It's best to gain someone else's experience by reading a book. So if we can help them do that. And if they have any questions, there's the Offshore Team Death Trap .com website where they can download some guides, execution guides, what to do, how best to do it, or email us. We'd be happy to reply and answer any questions that they may have.
Okay, love that. And we will link all that info in the show notes for everyone so they can just click on it here. All right.
Thank you.
Well, Luis, wow, incredible story. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share all this valuable wisdom from your journey with our listeners. We greatly appreciate it.
No, it's me who appreciates you giving me the time. Look, as I'm sure you and your audience knows, each entrepreneurial journey is unique, but we all have our similarities. And the more we listen to other people, we're able to spot patterns and and improve in our entrepreneurial journey. So I'm happy that I was able to contribute to that.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Luis.